everything is lining up to be pretty much perfect with Switch 2. I mean, literally it's coming after a long 8-year period of Nintendo Switch, so clearly we are definitely due for a hardware upgrade, but even from the software standpoint, where we're definitely due for a 3D Mario since Mario Odyssey released in 2017, and definitely a brand new Mario Kart since Mario Kart 8 originally released in 2014 on the Nintendo Wii U. And you look at the time period that we're in, we're going to be lining up for some big games the years that follow Switch 2, including probably a brand new Luigi's Mansion, another 3D Kirby game, and a lot more including Splatoon, and even the next big Animal Crossing. But there's one game franchise, there's one series that I'm a little worried about, and that is The Legend of Zelda. Nintendo decided to do something kind of ambitious for The Legend of Zelda by giving it two huge mainline open world games on one console. One in 2017 to start the Switch, and one last year in 2023 to pretty much end the Switch in a way. It was cool to get two Zelda games, but I fear it might hurt its chances of seeing any type of mainline Zelda game anytime soon, meaning within the first 3 or even 4 years of Nintendo Switch 2, which sounds kind of like a nightmare. But one thing I like to do is go back and look at past patterns and see if it matches anything and what we can actually expect and the things Nintendo has done in the past with Zelda. But Ocarina of Time came out 2 years after the launch of Nintendo 64. Wind Waker came out 1 year after the GameCube. Twilight Princess came out the same day as the Wii released, but released both on GameCube and Wii. The Wii U had absolutely no Zelda games technically, but Breath of the Wild came out the same day as the Switch, but also cross-released with the Wii U, similar to Twilight Princess. And then Tears of the Kingdom was 6 years later after that. Now with that data, Nintendo really hasn't gone past 2 years with any mainline 3D Zelda game, but we can go back earlier and talk about some other games that released. For instance, we do have the NES, but it's kind of confusing because it released only in Japan in 1983 and in the States in 1986, but the first Zelda game released in 1986, so you could say 3 years later, technically, but for the States it was same year. Link to the Past was the same year, just literally months later. Link's Awakening was actually 4 years later since the Game Boy originally released. The Oracle games were the same year as Game Boy Advance, and Spirit Tracks, which was the first DS Zelda game, was 3 years after the DS had come out. So yes, we see games like Spirit Tracks and Link's Awakening being 3 and 4 years later, but those were mobile consoles. Those were handheld consoles and relatively smaller games in comparison to any mainline Zeldas. But for the most part, we always see new Zelda games on the same year of a new console or a year to 2 years later. And this time, it's not looking so good for that to happen again, especially when Nintendo is actually being very ambitious with their Zelda games now. They're now huge, giant open world adventure games that are gonna take a while to actually develop. It took Breath of the Wild a very long time with many delays, and same with Tears of the Kingdom, which was just a direct sequel that even used the same world. I mean, seriously, it took just about 6 years for us to finally get Tears of the Kingdom, which was planned for a lot earlier, but you saw what happened. And normally we could always expect around 4 to 5 years of development cycles, but this time I feel like it might be once again a lot longer since they're going a completely new and bigger direction with Zelda now, and I'm expecting more along the lines of 5, 6, or maybe even 7 years of development time. And if we're predicting around 5 to 6 years at the very least, we're going to be waiting until 2028 or even 2029 for a new Zelda game on Switch 2, which means by then we'll be in year 4 to year 5 of the brand new console of Switch 2 without a Zelda game still, which is going to be pretty insane. Like I said, there will be tons of other Switch 2 games to tie us over until then, like the next 3D Mario, Mario Kart, Smash Brothers again, Splatoon, Animal Crossing, the whole lot. We could just keep on going. And you know what? Maybe it's a good thing, because we're definitely due for like a launch 3D Mario game or even a Mario Kart at this point, and maybe it's time for other franchises to take the helm, like Metroid Prime 4 could be a big early title for the Nintendo Switch 2, or maybe a brand new Star Fox game in the first couple of years that's really ambitious and really huge. Maybe time for other games to be the main Switch staple highlights, the way Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom seem to be the Switch highlight. But it still means Zelda fans are going to be in the dark for a very long time with brand new hardware, which is going to suck. But at the same time, it seems like Nintendo might have a plan to combat this giant gap in between games. The Zelda team are no strangers when it comes to remakes, remasters, ports, and even smaller scale Zelda games to to actually tie us over in between the mainline ones. On the Switch alone, we got 2 Warriors games, the original Hyrule Warriors in a definitive edition version this time around, and also one based on Breath of the Wild being Age of Calamity. We did get a tease that The Legend of Zelda would eventually get a remaster, and it actually happened, which was really cool, which is one of my favorite Zelda games of all time, so obviously I loved seeing that game come back. And we also got a remake of a previous top-down 2D Zelda game being Link's Awakening that originated all the way back on the original Game Boy, so that was pretty awesome. They kind of touched everything, but at the same time, they didn't really touch anything. There's still so many major Zelda games that they never even brought back to Nintendo Switch, and with such a massive library already of past and new games, I can't believe that some of these games still haven't made the cut. For instance, we could have remakes of the Oracle games, or maybe even that third Oracle game that never came to fruition and was actually canceled, you know, in the vein of Link's Awakening or even Echoes of Wisdom would be really cool. Remaking the games with that kind of toy vibe, and honestly, it's the only 2 Zelda games I've never finished, so I would love to have a chance to play these again with modern hardware. We've been hearing continuous rumors of Ocarina of Time and eventually Majora's Mask getting remade. Honestly, I really would love them to do a completely, like, almost reimagining, kind of. Almost in the same vein as Final Fantasy VII's remake and Rebirth. Something like that would be so cool, maybe adding new story elements and just completely changing some of the parts of the game, but keeping it very classic in its gameplay as well. This could even pass for a lot of people as a major release. It would be so big. I'm just now realizing I completely left out the 3DS because Link Between Worlds actually came out just 2 years after the launch of the 3DS, and it had one of my favorite Zelda games of all time also, with Skyward Sword being The Legend of Zelda Link Between Worlds, which is just a phenomenal top-down 2D experience that kind of pulls from Link to the Past's story and feels like a spiritual successor of some sort. And this is one game that I would also love to come to Nintendo Switch eventually. And of course, they still haven't even touched the big ones with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, which already have HD versions from the Wii U that they could have just completely brought over, unless they want to do something else to them and make them even better or something. I don't really know, but whatever they're doing, they're definitely waiting for a reason, and maybe it's because they knew they're going to have this big gap. You know, Nintendo knows. They have things planned out years in advance, so maybe they saw that with Tears of the Kingdom coming out and Breath of the Wild within the same console, they're going to need some games to flesh out that giant gap, and saving Wind Waker and Twilight Princess for some time on Switch 2 just makes too much sense, so I completely get it. And yes, I know, I purposely left out and saved Echoes of Wisdom for the end of this video, because it also unfortunately means we're out of new games altogether. Considering the fact that we just got 2 open world Zelda games and a brand new top-down 2D Zelda game with Echoes of Wisdom, literally back to back, year after year, a brand new 2D Zelda game is probably also out of the question. So yeah, Nintendo's put themselves in a pretty scary situation with Switch 2. But even with all this said, there's still some hope even for new titles because of what has actually released. Technically, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom was completely developed by Grezzo, which worked on other past remakes and ports of Zelda games for Nintendo. This was completely done by them and kind of outsourced and maybe overlooked by Nintendo, but it wasn't Nintendo's core development team that actually made this, so maybe there's a chance that maybe the development team is working on something else entirely. There's also a very good chance that since Tears of the Kingdom for a lot of us felt very similar to Breath of the Wild, it used the same map, it used a lot of the same characters, cities, music, game mechanics, it was a lot like Breath of the Wild, we could all say that for sure. Maybe that was for a reason, and maybe along the same time they've been working on Tears of the Kingdom, they had a separate part of the team start developing ideas and start working on the next installment of Zelda and the next world and everything like that. So that's something that could have been happening, we really don't know, but just thought I'd throw it out there just in case that's what's going on. But I think my biggest fear is just Switch 2 ending up like the Wii U, where all we get is remakes, remasters, and ports of past Zelda games and absolutely no new ones. Let me make this clear, however, I do not believe that's what's going to happen. I do believe Nintendo has a plan, and they do have another big Zelda game being planned for some time for Switch 2. Yes, it might take 3, 4, unfortunately, maybe even 5 years, which is a very long time, but it does give us something to look forward to. And I think Nintendo's got enough big games in their sleeve to help us wait until that Zelda game releases. Plus, apparently right now, there's been some rumors going around that Breath of the Wild was going to get some type of 4K edition coming to Switch 2, which I'm like, at one hand, I'm like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, please, no, I'm so sick of this world of Hyrule. Like, I'm ready to see a new one. You know what I mean? I'm ready to move on past the world of Breath of the Wild. I'm done with the Wild era. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you think it's going to be a very long time until we see the next Zelda game? Is it going to have to be a long wait into the Switch 2 life cycle, or do you think we're going to see it relatively early, and do you trust Aonuma and the Zelda team to get the job done? Of course, we probably do, because they hardly ever let us down. I'm sorry, I was let down a little bit by Tears of the Kingdom. But besides that, definitely let me know in the comments down below, and make sure you leave a like and subscribe before you head out today, as a lot of you are watching are still not subscribed. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a good Thanksgiving for those that are celebrating. See you guys.